for other parts of our life. And that's what we're going to be doing tonight. So I will go through 10 different techniques we use. I'm not expecting anybody to go away and do 10 different activities. 1 or 2 is brilliant. Everyone's been swamped with far too much to do over the last year. But think through as we're going through what might help me, but also what might help me with any sports I do, what might help me in day-to-day life. And most of them should work across both. So we're going to cover 10 tools and the techniques. They help you with your sport. Lots of them are also really valuable with kind of day-to-day survival. And they're lots that I have used over the last year, particularly with athletes who are trying to manage life in lockdown, manage things being very different. So we're going to cover techniques that sit within 5 areas. And we'll do a poll on this in a second, because I'm really intrigued by which of these 5 areas people think will be most valuable to them. First one's managing anxiety. And that is probably the area I see people with most. It's the area that most phone calls to my business come in of, can you help me handle my anxiety before a big event? The next one's minimizing perfectionism. And we see lots of people in sport and exercise who've got high levels of perfectionism, which sometimes can be helpful and sometimes can be a real hindrance. So we use it to see how we can manage it much better. The next area is cultivating confidence. And we'll see confidence is one of the most valuable things you can have, probably in life, but certainly in sport. We'll look at how we can control the controllables. And I think certainly over the last year, that's been something that people who are able to do that have really thrived by doing. And the last one about building self-awareness. So can we stick the cool poll up? Does it go on top of, brilliant. So I would love to know what would be most helpful for you guys that we're talking through tonight. Ah, 70, almost done. Brilliant. Almost everybody's up there. Fabulous. That quite surprises me actually, but really nice, because actually cultivating confidence is my favorite area to work on. We can do some really fun stuff those activities you finish and you just feel like a real buzz and you feel like a nice sense of who you are. So that's good. But we'll look at all of those areas. The one that surprised me when I really started working in sports psychology was the importance of building self-awareness. It wasn't something that had struck me so much before. I guess before I started training in it, I thought there were these magic, box of tools or tricks that all these elite athletes knew and helped them be amazing. And over time, I've realized that it's so personal, and what works for one person absolutely doesn't work for another. And there's no kind of algorithm we give of how to be brilliant, how to have a great mental mindset or anything. It's about working out what works for you. And so if you guys can finish tonight with finding a couple of techniques that might work for you, then it should feel like success. So the biggest thing I end up dealing with is managing anxiety. And I will talk you through a very, very top line how we work with athletes to explain what is going on in their head when they are dealing with having to regulate their emotions, having to make decisions, either in sport or day-to-day life. And we talk about our brain having 3 key areas. We have our computer bit, which is like your habit brain. It does everything automatically for you and it is brilliant. Apparently, I don't know who worked this out, but we're supposed to make 35,000 decisions on average a day. So if we actually had to make all of those decisions, like purposefully, we would never get anything done. So instead, we have this section of our brain that does most of that for us. And I like to think of it doing about 90% of our decision making. Just get on with it. When you're playing a sport, when you're writing something, when you're doing something you love, you don't think about what you're doing. It's that part of your brain just gets on and does it for you. We love that part. And we have this part that sometimes gets called the human, but it's your prefrontal cortex, right on top of your head. And that part is really sensible. It's rational. When you have to make a decision, it goes back into your memories and your knowledge and your learning, and it pulls out the best answer for you, and you get on and do it. So we would love the other 10% of our decisions to sit there. If that happens, we're thriving, we're doing awesomely. However, our brain, above everything else it does, actually has one most important job. And that job is just to keep us alive. Beyond everything else, it doesn't want you to be a brilliant athlete. It doesn't want you to be like ruling the world with your business or flying through exams. It just wants you to stay alive. One way it does that is with this third part of our brain that's called our amygdala. And it basically thrives on threat. I imagine mine as a meerkat. You know, when you see the wildlife videos, and you've got a meerkat that's like swatting around the horizon, looking out for threat. That's like your amygdala, looking out for what's coming to get us. Sometimes it's really helpful. So if you've ever walked home at night and there's been a guy that's walked too close, or a group of kids that are kind of really leery and drunk, and you get that feeling at the back of your neck, something's not quite right, the hairs are standing up, that's your amygdala trying to keep you safe. It is telling you, get out of here, get somewhere safe. So our amygdala is very helpful for us at keeping us alive. The problem is that in modern society, it gets excited about the wrong things. So it will see threat as something like fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, fear of being judged, not being who you think you should be. So that could be somebody saying, I'm not going to go to that race because if I do badly, I'll no longer feel like a runner, and I don't want to feel like that. So it's easier not to go. And so our amygdala sends a bunch of chemicals around our body that prepare our body to escape if we need to. So we're either trying to escape, flight, fight. Those people that get really mouthy before something that they're scared about, or really quite aggressive, or really loud, or freeze. Some people will shut down. They just do not want to be there. Big headphones on, hiding in the corner, get away from me. And the chemicals kind of get our body ready to do one of those three reactions. And it's the cortisol and the adrenaline that gets sent around our body. They speed up our heart rate. They make us breathe faster. So before a competition, if we're doing sport, a little bit of that is really helpful. It makes us feel ready to get active and moving. But it also can make us feel quite nauseous. Your body is trying to get rid of everything inside it, one way or the other. So I've seen Ironman athletes on beaches before a 12-hour race throwing up, trying to get rid of everything. I've seen the queues at London Marathon for the toilets always make me laugh, because there's like everybody is desperately trying to empty everything of everything so that they can run and get rid of that fear. So you will feel a dodgy tummy, and it can also tighten your muscles, particularly your shoulder muscles for some reason. And so that's really difficult for, say, tennis athletes or rowers or canoeists, people that really need to use that part of their body very strongly. And so we want a little bit of this before we go and do something scary, but not too much. And so we'll go through two techniques quickly that we use a lot to help us manage those. And the first one, I would love you guys to do with me. Why we do it is when your heart rate and your breathing rate start to go up when you're anxious, your breathing rate will go from about 12 breaths a minute, which is probably what you're at right now, to about 20, which is what you're at when you are super anxious. This takes it down to about 5. And so it's a really nice tool to use. Say you've got an exam or a presentation and you're feeling over activated. This starts to calm you down. It's great in sports where you get a little bit of a break. So tennis, when athletes go over to get their water bottle, It's a really nice thing to do then if they're too anxious. And the one I use it for all the time is getting to sleep at night. So if you have any insomnia, if you were struggling to sleep, this slows your heart rate, your breathing rate down enough so that your body feels more prepared to sleep. It stops some of that rumination. So that's often what people use this one for. But if you could close your eyes and we breathe in through our nose, and you breathe in cool blue air for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold. And breathe out red air through your mouth for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe in blue air through your nose for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold. And breathe out red air through your mouth for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And open your eyes. And hopefully you'll start to notice your heart rate, your breathing rate should have dropped a little bit. So that is my favourite go-to technique for anyone that feels anxious. That technique is really good for calming your body down. Grounding is really good for calming your brain down. So when we get anxious, we have 2 types of anxiety. We have cognitive anxiety, which is that rumination going round and round in our head, and somatic anxiety, which is how your body is feeling. And they tend to play off each other and mean we get into this horrible cycle where we feel awful. So if we attack the body issues, the breathing, we can use the grounding to calm our brain down. And a really nice, easy technique is the rainbow technique. And so we literally go through the colours of the rainbow. I imagine most of you right now are doing the Richard of York gave battle in vain to remember the colours. And for each colour, we think of 3 things that are that colour. So you might have, we start with red, it might be red London bus, a red post box, my new shoes. And then you move to orange. So it might be my favourite bowl, Tigger from Winnie the Pooh, and a Satsuma. You just roll through each of those colours with 3 things. And by the time you get to violet, one, it's quite good because violet's really tricky to think of anything that's that kind of purpley colour. But it's really good that whatever we were stressing about 5 minutes ago is out of our brain because we've managed to distract it enough. And by focusing on things that are real and grounded, that we're in a better place. And that's a really nice kind of quick technique to use. And I find it's really good if you work with children and you find children getting anxious before something, you can literally talk that through with them. And you can ask them, give me 3 things that are red, 3 things that are orange. And it takes them away from those fears. That's our anxiety attacking stuff. Something that tends to make people very anxious, though, is when they've got perfectionistic tendencies. And we do tend to see lots of this in sport. Perfectionism is great because it means you set very high targets and you work really, really hard towards them. The problem is that you've set yourself a target that's impossible because there is no perfect. And so even if you get close to it, it will just get higher. And so you're constantly feeling like you're a failure. And then whilst you might actually be achieving brilliant things, your well-being is through the floor because you're never feeling like you've achieved what you should do. And so it can be really, really harmful when people have those perfectionistic elements. And they kind of miss the joy of all of their achievements. There's 2 we tend to try and help people deal with. One is internal perfectionism. So that is, I should be able to achieve this. I should be able to do this. I should be able to beat so-and-so. And noticing the word should in your internal kind of head chatter, or even when you talk to people, is really interesting. So if you're working with athletes as a coach, maybe, if you get people saying a lot, I should, then they've probably got a lot of that internal perfectionism going on. The other area is kind of socially prescribed perfectionism. And that's where you feel like you should be doing as well as everybody else you can see on Instagram, even though it's all a mirage and they're probably not doing anywhere near as well as it looks like. We feel we should live up to these expectations of others. And so we try and counteract both. This sounds so simple, and it's probably one of the hardest things I set people. But what we're trying to do to reduce some of the internal perfectionism is become more flexible. And I think sports psychology has not done itself any favors in the past when we have talked time and time again about mental toughness. And I was just as guilty when I started out. We really bang on about you've got to be mentally tough. And it's very kind of alpha, macho way of talking. And I think it really harms us, because actually we do best when we're mentally agile, when we can find the right behaviors and mindset for different environments and switch and change quickly. We tend to do much better. So to increase our mental agility, this is a challenge, but we try to set to do one thing every day for a week that you would never normally do, or do something you would usually do. The one I often give as an example is if you are someone that the second you get out of bed in the morning, you shake out your duvet and you smooth it all out and you leave your bed looking beautiful, try not to do that tomorrow morning. Just leave it. Leave the duvet scrunched up. Some people will really, really struggle with that. I can see some brilliant faces being made. If it's that you always have a cup of tea first thing in the morning, maybe have a cup of coffee instead. If it's that you always do a full face of makeup, have a day of no makeup. But do something differently. Really try and notice how uncomfortable that might make you feel, but also how proud it makes you feel that you've managed to be a bit more agile and a bit more flexible. So it's just something we throw in sometimes with athletes to try and get them to kind of realize that they can be more agile when they need to. If it's a social comparison, this just gets worse and worse the more that social media becomes a key part of our life. It can be a real drain on our positivity, on kind of optimism that we might have, on the energy that we want to display, and feeling like we have to keep up with it, and feeling like we have to keep up with others. And it's not just kind of social media now. Lots of people are feeling like they have to keep up with others on Strava or Zwift, and that everything is being judged against others. So when I work with athletes on this, we will actually almost do an audit of how different types of posts make you feel. And I always try and get them to keep training diaries, and so to drop in their training diary what they might have noticed from other people, how it made them feel, what emotions were prompted in it. So they can be more proactive with those emotions. Is it envy? Why are you envious? What are they doing that you would like to be doing? How could you put in place something that would help you do that so that it actually has a purpose, but also so you start to see how it's impacting your moods and your emotions. Then we get them to do a reality check. So that is finding somebody that they know really well, somebody that they don't just follow on Instagram or Snapchat, but they actually chat to a lot in day-to-day life. So that might be over WhatsApp, it might be text, it might be a family member. But look at what they post online and look at what is really going on in their life and see where that big gap is, because that can help them be a bit more cynical about the things that you're seeing on social and how realistic it is. So that somebody might have posted their beautiful looking dinner and their gorgeous dog that they went for a run with, but actually you know that the dog dived into the river, got covered in mud, and it took them 3 hours to clean the dog when they got home. So they don't post the reality of their day-to-day life, and you see that difference. Then when we've done that audit, we get people to keep those who help entertain or educate you, and mute. And we do mute rather than block or unfollow because we don't want to offend anybody, but mute those who make you feel angry or negative, so that you are in control of your social media. It's not in control of you. And I actually had an athlete say to me just before Christmas that it was so beautifully phrased of, so right now I see people's social media as information. Would I be better off seeing it as entertainment? I was like, yes, it's not information. It's what they want you to see. It's all curated. See it as entertainment, and it takes away so much of that power to hurt you. So that helps us with that socially prescribed perfectionism. Then the bit you guys wanted, confidence. I call it cultivated confidence and not just confidence, because, and I think this is really appropriate for Women's Sport Collective, because I have seen overconfidence more often in male athletes, where actually it's quite harmful, because it means if you're overconfident, you don't do whatever it takes to perform at your best, because you know you could just rock up to the start line and you'll be okay. That's not what we want to see for people that are doing brilliantly in life. Cultivated confidence was prompted by an athlete I interviewed for my new book for teenagers. And I interviewed within it 10 great athletes for their advice that they would give to teenagers. And I contacted a Paralympic athlete called Emma Wiggs. She's a paracanoeist. And I said, I want to talk to you about confidence. She's like, I am so not confident. Why would you want me? I've never sat on a start line and thought I'm going to win this. I was like, don't be ridiculous. You've got Paralympic gold medal from Rio. You've got 8 world championship titles. How are you not confident? She went, no, I'm not confident. So, but when I sit on the start line, I know that I've trained harder than anybody else. I've asked more questions. I've lifted more in the gym, and I've eaten more cottage cheese than any other athlete could ever eat. And I was like, that's the difference. The difference is that preparation and knowing that you've done whatever it takes. And so that you actually, not that you don't mind how you do, but it doesn't matter so much because you've done everything you could. And so you feel comfortable with that. That kind of confidence is what we're looking for. And if I could have a magic wand and give that to people I work with, confidence would be, cultivated confidence would be the right source we would go for. And we know that most robust sources of confidence, there's 2 really robust sources that tend to stick even if we have a really bad day, really bad event. One of those is preparing really, really well. And the other is having evidence we've achieved it before. So we'll look at 2 ways we can do that now. This is my favourite activity to do with anybody. Love it. And we get a jar, just like a washed out jam jar is fine, and 25 bits of paper. And on those bits of paper, the first 5, you write on 5 strengths that you have got. So this is when a training diary or a day-to-day diary can be really helpful, because you can look back through your diary to pull out key strengths that you've noticed in what you do. And again, in a training diary, you'd have 5 training sessions you're proud you've completed. So that might be the run you did in the snow when you did not want to leave your house, but you still went out and did it. Or that football session where it was your first night and you were terrified of what people were going to say or judge you or whether you'd be good enough, and you still turned up and you did it. So things you're proud of there. Then you've got 5 sheets of paper, 5 times you overcame something you feared you couldn't. And that could be anything, but it could be, I never thought I could start my own business and I did it. I never thought I could run a marathon, and yet I managed it. Never thought I could go through childbirth, and yet obviously I had to. So all of those things that at the start of it, you were, oh my God, how is that possible? But you did it. The next one is the hardest for anybody to do. It takes longer than any other section, and everybody screws up their face not wanting to do it. It's 5 things you love about yourself. But actually, when you come up with them, you can kind of see the light in people's eyes when they're like, oh, yeah, I'm okay, that's good. So that's a really nice element to add in. And then 5 lovely things that other people you respect have said about you. If you work in teams, this is a brilliant activity to do. So when I do this kind of activity did it recently with a cheerleading squad, and they each then had to say something they liked for each other's confidence jars about other people in the squad. And their eyes lighting up when they kind of got all these compliments from people they respected in their team, and they had their coaches saying what they loved about their approach or their training strategy or their mentality. Was brilliant. So if you work in a team environment, that's a lovely element to have. Why I love a confidence jar is that our brains, because they have this focus on keeping us alive, have more weight towards negatives. And so the stat I heard was that we need 5 positives for every negative. And so this is a really nice way to kind of give you a very physical vision of the positive things about yourself when your brain starts to do those negatives. And I love it when my athletes send me a little picture of their confidence jar on their bedside table in a hotel room before they go off and compete, because they've literally take it with them everywhere. They take it to competitions, and it's a really nice positive manifestation. So if I would say, if you're taking one thing away from tonight, this is the one I see that's really helpful. And then imagery. We won't go into depth in this, but what really struck me is when I was writing the Teenage Sports Psych book and I interviewed those 10 athletes, I asked what's the one sports psych technique they valued the most, and they all said imagery, which was fascinating because most of the people I work with hate learning it. It's the one thing we'll learn and they never really go away and do and don't get behind it. But the ones that do absolutely thrive from it, because it does something called functional equivalence. So it teaches your brain it has already done the things you're a bit nervous to go and do. So I love the way Dina Castor talks, and her book is brilliant if you're in sports psychology, because her whole book is written almost from a sports psychology perspective of how she used it in her running. But she used to go through mental rehearsal every single day before her big championships, so that any situation that occurred in a race, she'd already handled, she'd already got it. So there's 5 different purposes we tend to use for imagery. So it can be rehearsing plans or strategies, specific sports skills, either dialing down anxiety or amping it up. Some people don't tend to get almost excited enough, to feel in control or focused, or to boost your motivation. When you know why you're doing it, you write a script, and we go super Hollywood. It's a 2 to 3 minute script of exactly what situation you want to happen in that area. You make it realistic, and the fun bit is that you have to include all the senses. So it's what can you see, what can you hear, what can you taste, and taste can be a really strong one. Sometimes it might be those energy gels that are a bit metallic. I do a triathlon in Windsor every year, and I think I've done it 16, 17 times now, and I can still taste the diesel in the water when you get into that water at Windsor. But the second I get that smell or that taste of diesel ever, it brings me back, and it makes it alive in my brain. Sound is another one. The sound of the helicopters at London Marathon, the toilet doors banging, the crinkly blankets, silver foil blankets you put on to keep warm beforehand, brings it back very quickly. So when we use our senses in our imagery, it makes it much more realistic. Our brain believes we've already done it, and so we're able to almost trick it into doing it before. So when we've written a script, we record it on our phone, you just listen to it. Some people do it in real life, so they might be doing, say, a turbo session, and they'll be listening to their imagery. Other people kind of listen to it in the car on the way to something, or at home. But it's a really nice tool to use. We've flown through it now, but there's actually some worksheets on my website that you can download to get kind of the full how to do it properly. Then this was super helpful for lockdown. And I think athletes would have dealt probably better with lockdown stuff because they understood how to control controllables. And it always interests me, the week before London Marathon or any big marathon, if you look at social media, everybody is talking about one big thing. What's the weather going to be like? It's the one thing we cannot control. Can't do anything about it. You can wear different kit. We can't change that. And yet it's what we focus on. And so much in day-to-day life, we worry about the things we have got no control about. Will they like me? Will they judge me? Will I live up to their expectations? Will we win? Can't do anything about those ones. And we waste so much mental energy focusing on the wrong things. So a really nice technique, if you've got a big event coming up, and this could be a presentation or a sporting event, is a control map. And you literally write 3 columns and you write down what things can I control? What can I influence? Occasionally there are things you can influence. What have I got no control over whatsoever? And it's a really black and white way of putting it in front of people of you're probably spending most of your time worrying about those elements in that no control thing. How does that help you? It really, really doesn't. It just wastes your energy. Let's move over to the control. What can you control? And when you've managed those, then you're in a much better place to achieve whatever you need to achieve. So it's a lovely, nice technique. I saw it used really wonderfully ahead of Rio Olympics, where Vicky Holland, the triathlete, talked about, she wrote down minute by minute every single thing she needed to do that she was in control of before she did her race that day. So literally what time she was having a shower, what she would eat for breakfast at what time she was doing her teeth, what time she was pumping up her tires. And then she described it as when she stood on the beach, ready to dive into the water for the race, she knew she had done everything she could. She had no worries. What happened, happened. What happens in a race, kind of out of your control after a while. But at least she could stand there feeling like she'd done everything she could. And it put her in a great mindset for the race. And she got a bronze medal. So it really, really worked for her. And this, I think, it's important for all of us. But if you work with children, it's really vital. When I've done training in mental health issues, and particularly in eating disorder issues, we notice there is a triad of kind of traits that tend to make people more susceptible. That's sensitivity, anxiety, and perfectionism. And when we look at what helps people manage those better, it's having high levels of emotional literacy. And we tend to use about 7 basic emotions day to day. There are actually at least 130. When we use one of the basic emotions, we don't tend to have a very good solution to it because it's just too generic. I'm angry. I'm sad. That doesn't really give us anything to go with. We can't help somebody solve that, and we can't help somebody develop better coping mechanisms to deal with it. But if we use a specific word, then we can go off and do something about it. We can find a better coping mechanism. So you can Google this. It's called an emotional wheel. And instead of using one of those 7 words in the middle, we use one of those 130 ones around the outside. And it means we can start to notice how we are actually feeling so much more effectively. So rather than I'm disgusted, actually I'm hesitant. Okay, well, hesitant you can do something with. Why are you hesitant? What's holding you back? What might we do to give you some more comfort to try it, to feel more secure? And so if you can start using those words around the outside with people and with yourself, it really helps you get a handle on what you're actually feeling. For kids, there are some really good books. So I have a book for my 4-year-old. It's called something like How Am I Feeling Today? And it has pictures, 12 pictures, and she can point at one. And then we can go to a page and learn more about that feeling. But all of these feel like very good ways to kind of protect ourselves from some of the negative mental health issues that we can have. So it's called the emotional wheel. If you Google it, some different versions come up, all really helpful. And finally, I think self-awareness and learning not just to be an expert in our sport and the techniques, but learning to be an expert in ourselves is really, really valuable. I do a lot of this through work, through kind of training diaries, of being able to spot the things that you like, you dislike, where your strengths are, where your limitations are, where you might get your support from. So doing this and purposely developing your self-awareness can be really, really valuable. What we want to do is design our environment so that we do this all the time in a way that works for us. And so this technique called ACE was something I used with all of my athletes when lockdown hit last year. And I still suggest it. I gave it to somebody yesterday to work on. He's quite isolated at the moment abroad as an elite athlete, and it can be a really good technique. So every day you have to achieve something. It doesn't have to be writing a new book or setting up a new company. For lots of the kids I work with, it was literally tidying their bedroom, because I thought I'd get some plus points with their parents too. But it could be making lunch for your family or doing a piece of homework that you've been putting off. But something that feels like an achievement, gives you a nice dopamine rush in your brain. You feel good. You get kind of that buzz of I've done something. Every day communicating with somebody outside of your house. So that can just be sending a WhatsApp group to your grandma. It could be being on a chat group, but making sure you are communicating with the outside world and you're not losing that sense of belonging that is so important to us. And most importantly, every day you do something that you enjoy, something that brings you fun. So it could be baking, could be watching a new episode on Netflix, it could be going for a walk with somebody, could be playing with your dog, but something that's fun. And if you're trying to do this as a very strategic technique, I try and get somebody to write down 10 things under each. So 10 achievements they might work towards, 10 people that they would communicate with, 10 things they enjoy. So each day they don't even have to think about it. They can just look at that list and go, oh, that's what I'm going to do today. It's a nice kind of mental health activity to do to keep us feeling good well-being. And then my favorite thing to do is working with people on their values. Because when we know our values, we can make better decisions, we feel more purposeful, we can tune into what we like. And when we know what matters to us, we tend to notice that when that is missed, our amygdala gets triggered and we start to get that anxiety. So knowing your values is really helpful for moving you towards things. And it means whatever is going on in your life, even when you're struggling with things, you can always make the decisions that move you slightly closer towards your values. You won't always be able to hit all of them, but moving towards them helps you feel a lot more authentic and a lot more like you're moving in the right direction. I think that was really helpful over the last few months of lockdown, where people felt like they were kind of almost like doggy paddling, but they wanted to be moving forward and they were just staying in the same place. So you can find this on my website too. It was a very long list. There's about 50 words. But really helpful for you to look through, maybe print this off and cross off the things that aren't you. And I would guess you would get to about, on average, 22 left. And then you have to get really harsh with yourself. Because lots of them will feel like you, but what's really you? What is at your very, very core? What matters more to you that you would go out and kind of fight for, or you'd work towards really hard? So mine and my family, success and courage. And they're really helpful. So if I've got a decision of, should I do this piece of work or spend the weekend with my daughter? If the piece of work doesn't help me move particularly towards success or courage, then my daughter's going to win every time. If I've got 2 projects to work on, one of them would be easy and one of them would require courage, I'm going to go for the one that would require courage, because it means I'll be moving forward. It means I feel more me. So when you know yours, it's really, really helpful to constantly drive forward in a positive way. So my website, performanceinmind.co.uk, it's got loads of free worksheets on it. It's the section called Performance Zone. So if you click on that, you've got the free worksheets. I've got a book that's good for coaches and trainee sports psychologists called Performing Under Pressure. And that is the 9 reasons people tend to come and see a sports psych. So things like lack of anxiety or dealing with setbacks, but also 64 of those types of strategies that we use. For kids, I've got a book that came out last week. Sue's very kindly holding it up for me. You can't miss it. It's got a very bright cover. It's called I Can, A Teenage Athlete's Guide to Mental Fitness. And it's a workbook. So I've seen people on Instagram this week already filling in sections, which has made me bounce with joy so much. And then for adults, we have something called a sporting brain box that I've worked on with a brilliant runner designer called Sarah, who runs an organisation called Art of Your Success. And so it's physical activities that you can do in there to make you a better athlete. Otherwise, I'm always on Twitter, far too much, at Josephine Perry, and I love to chat kind of sports psychology stuff. So I will come back on screen. And we've got one final poll before any questions. Are you able to put that up, Kate? And that is, of the 10 tools that we've looked at tonight, which one are you likely to go off and do? I think it will. So which one felt like something that might help you? Are you able to answer that? Whether people can have the slides?
Oh yes, yeah, no, I did. Sorry, I did say that earlier if they could, but yes, I will.
Brilliant, cool. Yes, so anything you need on there, and there's lots more on my website anyway on some of these techniques. So that looks like confidence jar is the winner. Yes, my favourite too. I love it when I get teachers who've gone away and they've done it with their classes, because people have never been asked what's amazing about themselves before, and they get a whole little jar to take away and kind of remember that they're fabulous. And good to see the emotional wheel coming up there. So just, yeah, type in emotional wheel to Google and you'll be able to print out a copy. And we use it in our house of kind of, how are you really feeling? To actually be able to kind of dissect a lot more and have a better conversation.
I think there's a few people saying they're going to use it with their partners and husbands as well, I think, to have a better conversation.
Brilliant.
Excellent. Oh, thank you so much for that. I'm conscious we've got about 5-6 minutes left and it would be lovely to put a couple of questions to you, but that was absolutely brilliant. I should just say anecdotally, I remember when I worked for Cadbury's, and I've just done the maths, it was 31 years ago, doing an away day where we sat around and everyone fed in feedback of the positive things about you, and I can still makes me feel emotional now that I was really surprised at the time, things I had no idea about, and like 31 years on that still had that same impact. But how often, Kate and I say nice things to each other quite a lot, but how often do people actually sit down and you know do that? Very, very powerful. So
I'd also say, if you do get nice things ever emailed to you, make a file in your inbox and collect them, because when you have a rubbish day and something's gone wrong or you've lost a contract, or looking back through that file makes you feel so much better. So collect the good stuff. It's
so powerful, isn't it? I just read something about holidays. Even if you talk about where you've been in the past or trips, it evokes the positive feelings of that you experience when you go on them. So just even talking about them. But anyway, all very powerful. I said not much time, and I'm now asking you my own personal questions. Someone asked about how you would use these techniques if someone's hesitant about using them. How do you work with? I'm going to not take people off mute and just ask the questions so we get through a few more. But how would you deal with that, do you think?
So I guess I'm lucky because I'm in a session with somebody. I start them then and there. So if you tell somebody about a technique, there's not that much chance they're going to go off and do it. But if you actually start it with them, they tend to go off and finish it. So particularly things like with the colourful breathing, I will get people to do it together in a group. And then actually you can say to somebody, let's try that breathing. Confidence jar, I will do as a session with somebody and we do it together. And actually for me, it's really helpful as their psychologist because I can then see those positive sides. But I think for coaches, it's really helpful as well because you actually get to see what people are putting up. So yeah, physically starting to do things with people really helps, or integrating it into practice. So here's the emotional wheel. Put a big one up on a wall. Everyone needs to go and stick a star on where they're feeling today. And actually, if everybody's in too much of an area, okay, let's chat about it. And so you can make it as visual and as active as possible.
Laura Maria, would you like to take yourself off mute and ask your question, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sue. Thanks, Josephine, for a great presentation. My question was about the new situation we are in with the pandemic and the lockdown. And I think, at least for me, it has brought some new emotions like social anxiety, and especially when the world is opening up. So I'm just wondering how to tackle this maybe newfound situations that we find ourselves in, and what would be the advice to like slowly get back to normality, if that makes sense. Thanks.
Completely. And I'm working with lots of people this week who are going back to sport and really, really struggling. In fact, I'm doing a radio phone in next week because so many people are dealing with that. And I don't think it helps. Everyone's like, yay, we're all going back. And it feels exciting. And actually, some people are really anxious about that. So what I've been advising people is to be open with their coaches. And to be open with other people, because I can promise you will not be the only person in an environment feeling that way. And so actually knowing there are other people feeling the same way, the coaches that I've worked with are certainly being really flexible about how people might behave as they go back, or just go back for half a session, and make sure you've got somebody there that you're meeting when you get there, because having that accountability of somebody to meet makes you go, but it also means you've both got kind of a friend. It doesn't feel like you're going to walk in and be alone. So really use other people to get back into it, because it is really daunting. And there's almost a little bit, it feels like, of you don't want to get too excited to go back in because we might all get stopped again. So there's that kind of back and forth bit as well. So there's so many conflicting emotions, but really talking about them, because there will be other people in exactly the same boat. That's something I've been working on all week. So lots of people are feeling the same.
Thank you, Laura Maria. Amber, did you want to ask your question, please?
Yeah, I kind of had a question about almost the reverse of the anxiety side that you kind of touched on there, in terms of kind of almost, I don't know, maybe we don't have long enough, but in like a exercise almost the opposite, like when someone wants to almost increase that nervous energy, whether that's for like a training session to just try and get them motivated to get there, or in a competition itself.
Music. So music is super, super powerful. So one of my favorite sessions to do with athletes, partly because it keeps me young, because I work a lot with teenagers. So as a 44-year-old mum, I get to learn like what's cool, although they obviously don't use the word cool. But yeah, writing what we call a performance playlist. So it should be about 10 tracks, stuff that talks to you. So it doesn't matter what genre it is, but it talks to you. A few of those tracks, it should be in the words that get you. Stuff from movies or shows you love is really powerful because it invokes all the visual elements too. A good beat that gets you really going for it. And then the key trick with it is to put it on shuffle. Because if you know what music you are expecting, because you have the same list the whole time, your brain doesn't get so excited. But if you don't know what's coming, when you get those first few bars of a new track and it's a track you love, suddenly you get that dopamine rush again. You're like, I'm up for this. So yeah, write a playlist. And it's a fun thing to do anyway, because you get to sit and listen to a load of tracks and work out what gets you going.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, Amber. Great question as well too. I think we need a Women's Book Collective playlist at some point as well. We have to. I'm going to wrap it up because we are just at 8 o'clock and I'm really conscious of people's times, and we've been very good so far of never running on over. But thank you so much. I'm really pleased we were able to get to some of the questions. We will share the slides. We have recorded the session and we'll share that too. And just massive thank you to Josie and all our lovely contributors who's given her time to put the session together, to come and deliver it, you know, so kindly for us all. We really appreciate that, and do, as she said, kind of find her on social media and follow up and make those connections too. And I hope as these sessions build over time, it's interesting that people that are here and we're pulling out different elements too. So yeah, really, really powerful. But thank you so much, Josie. That was brilliant. And obviously people can, yeah, man, got my fantastic book here and many other books available too. But really appreciate that. And hopefully we'll see some of you at the networking call next week, or other events and calls in the future too. So thank you so much to everybody. Have a lovely rest of the evening. Thank you.